Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Kate Rose, who's here to share with us her new book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. So do you have questions if your partner is the one? Well, today's guest is here to share with us how to identify just that. So Kate Rose is an author, therapist, relationship expert, spiritual intuitive, and astrologer. She uses the stars to help her clients clarify their purpose and recognize the blocks that are keeping them from living the life they're designed to live. She holds an MS in the clinical art therapy from Springfield College and writes regular columns for your Tango, Elephant Journal, and her newsletter, Unedited. So welcome to the show, Kate Rose.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this new book.
My goodness, as soon as I heard about this, I knew we needed to talk. So what inspired you to write this?
My first book was actually called You Only Fall in Love Three Times. And the number one question that I received from readers was, but how do I know which one I'm in? And while we could say that in some cases it should be fairly obvious, people were wanting some real logical information in front of them to be able to possibly see some of the truths that can be more painful to see. And I've always had a love and practice of astrology. And I started noticing when people were asking for readings that there started to be specific patterns identifying different types of relationships, which also helped to point to our childhood wounds. And that is really where Written in the Stars was birthed from, is to be able to give people more information about themselves, their lessons that they were born into in this lifetime, so that they can then help themselves become better, grow, heal, and have better relationships and more of the life that they want.
Well, since you mentioned your first book, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the different types of relationships that we could have.
The idea is that even if, let's say, we have 10 different times in our lifetime that we fall in love, that in all truth, each of all of those relationships really only falls under one of three loves. The first usually being the soulmate relationship. That's the one that we tend to get into when we're younger, whether it's a high school sweetheart, a college relationship, something when we're younger. The soulmate is the one that looks right. It approves and kind of appears with our family conditioning, with the society that we've grown up in, very similar backgrounds. But the soulmate relationship is really only our starting point. And so, if we choose to kind of go on this journey of having love be a vehicle for self growth, then the next phase comes to realizing that we have to be able to end this soulmate relationship in order to be able to identify what our authentic truth is and who we are in this lifetime. That kind of opens up the door for the karmic relationship to come in. The karmic relationship is really the one that we spend such a great deal of time wishing was right for us. It's the one that's usually has the most chemistry, sometimes a lot of passion. There can be a lot of unhealthy aspects as well, such as an off and on type, system for the relationship. There can be a lot of highs, a lot of lows. There can even be a lot of, unfortunately, unhealthy or toxic behavior. But the karmic relationship is really about us being able to heal our childhood wounds, our generational trauma, and be able to have the boundaries, the self-worth, the confidence to be able to know that we deserve what it is we most want. That's kind of what propels us to ultimately end the karmic. And then we end up in the twin flame, the third love, the healthy love. And that's the one that really just feels right. It might go against kind of what we had anticipated as far as partner goes, whether it's looks or background, but it's someone that we share a very deep bond and connection with. And that's also the relationship that we're then able to actually figure out how to receive a healthy love, how to be a partner. And each relationship, as much as they really affect our own process of self-growth, they're also kind of indicative of the different phases of life that we as humans even move through.
So I understand that you have a unique astrology that you were born with. Can you share that with us?
Yes, we all kind of have a little bit basic information of astrology, it seems, especially relating to our sun sign. And what all of that means is it's part of what we have as our birth chart. Our birth chart means that it's where the planets, the nodes of the moon, the asteroids, where they exactly were when we were born. That birth chart most usually is we look up our sun horoscope signs. We, maybe want to figure out when we're going to fall in love or when we're going to get a specific career break. But in all reality, this idea of the birth chart being so unique for you is also that everything that you go through in your life, including, let's say, hurtful times in your childhood or an absent parent, all of that is actually written into your birth chart as well. Even in looking in the birth charts, when you compare those with your parents, you can be able to actually identify and see which relationship would possibly be stronger, which might be more problematic. And then that's the basis for then being able to learn and compare with romantic partners, which really is what kind of gives that evidence of where you're at with yourself and your progression of relationships.
So I think one of the questions, and you kind of hinted on this a little earlier, is that, people want to know like what relationship they're in. So how do we tell, like, are we in a soulmate relationship or is this a karmic thing? Where are we?
In the relationships, many times we can ask ourselves certain questions. For the soulmate, we could say, do you know who you are? Do you know what your truth is? Did this marriage or relationship have anything to do with simply the person that looked, quote unquote, like you should marry? The karmic relationship, a lot of these questions are any of the patterns or behaviors similar to what you experienced in childhood? Is it consistent? Does it honor your boundaries? Does it honor what you're worth? The twin flame, we could say, what are the biggest triggers? If the biggest triggers are learning to receive or how to actually come together, being able to work through previous triggers of karmic relationships with a very profound connection, then that could be a twin flame. But astrologically speaking, we're also seeing that certain astrological transits and patterns really play effect into each relationship. For instance, Saturn is incredibly important in being able to look at and identify whether we're in our soulmate relationship. Being able to compare our parents' birth charts, the South Node, becomes incredibly important in being able to identify the karmic relationship. And then the North Node, Venus, the planet of love, that's really able to kind of help give us that confirmation that maybe we really have that twin flame that we've been searching for.
I was really surprised in your book when you shared you shared different examples that you have, and one of Charlotte and her family, and then continuing on these like relationship dynamics. I'd love for you to share that with us.
What's really fascinating is being able to actually look at, let's say, what is happening when we are in our childhood and being able first we have to be honest. Many times when I first speak with people, they say, oh, I had two loving parents and I had a great childhood. And the reality is that we can hold multiple truths as aware and conscious adults. So we could say that we love our parents and we had a great childhood, but it doesn't mean that we were necessarily loved in all the ways that we needed to be or that we went through. And so, like in the example that you mentioned, I have clients who, let's say, will say, well, perhaps I felt maybe overlooked, or I felt like I wasn't necessarily loved as a child. It's so fascinating because we would see, let's say, their Saturn sign or South Node represented in, let's say, the parents' Venus sign. And that would indicate that they probably never really did receive that love. And then what's so fascinating is that person, Charlotte, another client, will then end up attracting partners with similar Venus signs to the parents, all in an effort to help teach her that she actually needs her own love.
What a wise lesson that is just by getting that information. And most of us never think about how important that is.
And that's I fell into this aspect of relationships kind of really being my specialty, and it's something that really is so fascinating because our relationships are do dominate a large part of our life, but the reality is that many times we're not necessarily aware of why we're going into them or what's behind the scenes of, oh, it's endlessly challenging, or no matter how many sessions of couples therapy we do, it doesn't seem to improve. But in looking at this information in Written in the Stars, we're able to actually see that many of the relationships that we go through really are there to help point us back to ourselves, to help us see, okay, am I looking for someone to, let's say, be that protector that I never had? Am I looking for someone to validate me, to show me that I'm worthy? And in all reality, with any of these wounds that we become aware of, the thing that's the hardest, but also the most beneficial, is realizing that nobody can ever give ourselves what we need the most. It's only ourselves that can actually heal that part of us that hurts, that is that wound.
So, what is the easiest way for someone to, get their birth chart so that they can start this process?
The best place to start, there's numerous websites. If someone, let's say, were to Google, how do I get a free birth chart, or free astrological birth chart online? My favorite, though, is actually Cafe Astrology. It's a very easy site to use. You just put in your birth information, which is comprised of the date that you were born, the time, and the location. What I always tell people is, sometimes, especially, let's say, if we're doing the gynecological astrology, which Written in the Stars is about, a lot of times parents or grandparents even might not have the time. So I always say the most important thing when doing this is especially the date and the location. The time is immensely helpful if available, but you can still get a big piece of information even without it. When you enter it into the Cafe Astrology website, you end up getting a whole base of information where it will tell you what your sun sign is, but also where your north node is. It will tell you also about the masculine and feminine energy, which is something that becomes hugely important on this journey as well. So before kind of diving into Written in the Stars and even kind of understanding their own soul blueprint, as I call it, the best place to start is really just getting a printout. And then there are places in the book to be able to kind of fill out the blank birth charts.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And yeah, I've got my birth chart, but I always like checking it out and seeing, you know,
Me too.
seeing it. It's like, hey, it's the same thing. Okay, we're right on track. So,
Exactly.
well, and in your book, you talk about Saturn is our soulmate. So, can you expand on that and explain
Yes.
what that's all about?
So Saturn is our soulmate, and that even is comprised of kind of what I sometimes will call your Saturn relationship. And that is really talking about Saturn really representing the soulmate relationship and connection. The reason for that is, when looking at the birth chart, let's say that you print out of yourself or parents, romantic partners, there are going to be two places where karmic lessons are going to show up in the birth chart. The first place is Saturn. That is your personal karma that you came into this life with to learn, to be able to move through, and be able to eventually succeed with. The other is the South Node. That more or less is the generational trauma that we might be going through. But for the Saturn relationship and the soulmate, being able to identify your Saturn sign and then being able to compare it to the relationships that you've been in, as well as, let's say, any other tie-ins with parents, which is incredibly common. It's very helpful to begin there, because learning your Saturn sign is all about recognizing, where am I going to need to put work in? Saturn rules all themes of work, dedication, boundaries. It's also known as a beautiful name of the Lord of Time and Karma. So when you can identify your Saturn sign, you also will really be able to easily identify those soulmate relationships in your life. And again, I operate on the space of, no relationship is bad, no relationship is a mistake. It's just a part of our growing process and what we need to call in. So having Saturn be our soulmate is very similar to what the relationship represents, as far as it's there to be our teacher, to begin our journey.
Wow, I love that. That's pretty impactful, how much, and it's interesting, and just how much this all impacts our journey or our walk on this, during this lifetime.
It really does. I mean, all depending on the different planet, they will all have a huge significance with us, but especially Saturn, because the thing with all of these relationships is that there's many times I'll speak with people and they will have multiple soulmates. They will have multiple karmic partners. And so it's almost akin to you don't get to go to the next level unless you complete the level that you're at. And because the soulmate relationship is most often that primary, first, early on relationship, Saturn is really responsible for beginning your journey. The other thing that's kind of so fascinating that I found in all of my research is that just as we're seeing more evolution of society as far as being able to have conscious conversations, and we're talking about different aspects of spirituality and awareness, with the relationship component, we are also evolving. Many grandparents, great grandparents, they actually remained in their Saturn relationship. They remained in their soulmate connection throughout their life. That doesn't mean that they had horrible lives or they weren't necessarily living the way that they would want to. But it does mean that as humans, we are now craving more. We're craving more awareness about ourselves, especially as we've been able to shift from, let's say, merely surviving many immigrants to this country to now thriving as second, third, fourth generations.
In your book, you talk about the journey of love is really about the self. How is that?
What I love and what can often cause some frustration for people is that the journey of love is the journey to the self, because whatever we are is what we will attract. And so, for many of us, depending on where we're at in our journey, if we are struggling with self-worth, or if we have been enmeshed within, a phase of codependency, we are going to attract someone who makes us feel unworthy. We're going to attract someone that we feel we are responsible and have to care for and provide for as, let's say, a parent. So, whatever we are within ourselves is what we will attract. Most often, it's thought of that purely in the twin flame connection is there that mirror of the soul that's present. But in all reality, every relationship is a mirror of ourself. It just depends on what version of ourself we are in that moment. So, through this entire process of learning and growing, healing through these different types of relationships, what really ends up happening, not just that we find an amazingly healthy love, but that we get to the space where we're truly in love with who we are. We know our authentic self apart from any conditioning, apart from any childhood wounds. And that's the love that really allows us to be able to receive and give it to another, that allows us to feel that we have accomplished kind of what our soul path was for this lifetime.
How is it that we part ways with our soulmate? Because I think a lot of times people feel like they're just being ripped apart when that happens.
It can be really hard to leave a soulmate relationship, especially as for many of us, it was the first time that, let's say, we really fell in love, or even many times, especially, let's say, if it's at an earlier age, if it's a high school sweetheart that we married, or even in our 20s, what happens just kind of based on human development at that time is that our sense of self gets fused with another person. So, especially those early on marriages or relationships that we end up forming with the soulmate connection, we feel that awful, horrendous pain, let's say, of being ripped apart because our sense of self and identity is actually based in that other person. It's based on being so and so together in a relationship in the life that we've created. But to actually, and kind of what is the catalyst for that soulmate kind of break up and transition onto a new lesson, is realizing that we might love them. They might love us. Perhaps there was nothing toxic in the connection. It's just something that ends up not feeling right. And ultimately, what it is the exploration of truth, where someone might say, I don't know what comes next. I don't know who I am, or maybe I don't even know what love is, but I'm at the phase of my life where I know that I need more. And it's the idea of starting a journey to discover, what does authenticity even mean? What does my truth even mean? And many times, even what is love? The soulmate breakup can also involve being able to decide where, let's say, mom and dad, the family friends, we're all involved in this relationship or marriage. It's also realizing that I might have to upset some people in order to be my true self. And so it's also that separation of not just the love that looked good or that you thought would last, but also the person that you were taught, conditioned to be, breaking with that and truly kind of beginning that quest to discover who you really are. But with soulmates, the thing that ends up happening, whether it's immediate or takes time, is that even if there is a breakup in the romantic relationship, soulmates do tend to stay in our lives. Very rarely are those situations where we end things with a soulmate and we never see or hear from them again. It's much more common to share children with them, to co parent, and even possibly to be friends with them. The soulmate, again, kind of refers to that aspect of it's someone from the similar soul family. And just like we can have best friends or even pets who are part of that soul family, we can do that with ex lovers as well. It just might need to take time.
So, is it possible for one relationship to be all of these different kinds of aspects?
This is definitely one of the most popular questions that I receive. And a lot of times when we're hearing that question or when people are asking it, it's because of where they're at with their own lessons and their healing. They want that relationship to last. Perhaps, let's say in the soulmate, they're asking that question because they're really afraid to disappoint their families, or they're really afraid to, let's say, get divorced and figure out how to co parent or be a single parent. In the karmic relationship, we ask that question. It's usually because we're struggling with our own healing. We still want to receive the love from this person that our inner child never received. So we're trying to do everything possible. We're, fingers crossed that this relationship can rebound. But the reality is that asking that question actually really shows more about where we are, again, that journey of the self, rather than the actual relationship. Because the soulmate relationship, in all reality, could it be anything like a twin flame? No, but it's going to always be, like we said, what it is. The karmic relationship, the whole purpose of it is to realize that no matter how long you try, how much you kind of twist yourself inside out for this other person, it's never going to actually change this connection. And only through going through all of this do we lose that fear that's behind the question of, is it possible to have all three in one? And instead, we're able to embrace the lessons as they arrive.
So, knowing that, what advice would you give somebody that's just having a hard time leaving a relationship that's probably run its course?
So it would really depend on what type of relationship it is. I would say, especially, let's say, if it was the soulmate connection where there was a lot of family themes, there was a lot of fear of disappointing or, even the unknown, kind of what comes next. A big part of that is being able to practice affirmations and begin to trust ourselves more deeply. Realize that no matter how much you might make other choices for other people, that's never going to take the place of you being secure and confident with your own self. A big part of this journey, the journey to self, the spiritual journey, is all about being okay with what is unknown. The karmic relationship is completely different. If, let's say, we're leaving that one, as that creates such that trauma bond with a partner that it often literally feels impossible to separate or leave from that person. In that case, the best place to start is by, if we can honestly, making a list of qualities, experiences, behaviors in the relationship, and then also being really transparent and looking at what we experienced when we were younger in our own childhood. The more that we can identify and have, again, some of that logic in front of us, the more we are able to then make the choices, along with affirming that we deserve more. We can keep ourselves safe, because both relationships are really a process. And I always tell people that we can never leave a relationship unless it feels like, for us, we are completely done. We can't leave it simply because our friends tell us that we deserve more. We can't leave it simply because, we don't we don't love that person anymore, whatever it might be. It has to be a space of really learning the lesson and knowing that we're making that choice for our authentic self. Otherwise, we kind of run the risk of that lesson coming back in another form.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Kate Rose in regards to her new book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
It's one thing to become attached to your perfect home, but what do you do when that home becomes attached to you? A family in dire need of a fresh start, a mysterious house tied to the past. Buried deep within the foundation of the old Far Hill Manor lies a centuries-old secret. Dark forces or something stronger just waiting to be discovered. Caretaker, a supernatural thriller by breakout authors R.J. Halpert.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Kate Rose, who's sharing with us her new book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. It's interesting. So would we have multiple karmic relationships, like one after another, and maybe not a soulmate relationship and not really a twin flame?
So what I've seen is most people have a soulmate. There are only a couple individuals that I've seen globally who, let's say, their best friend or a very close friend in their life is that soulmate relationship. For everybody else, there really is a romantic component to the soulmate relationship. With the karmic relationship, we can have multiples. It's actually quite frequent. Sometimes we can kind of just get it over with one karmic, but many times what we will do is we'll actually attract one karmic relationship that mirrors more of our mother relationship, and then one karmic relationship that mirrors more of our father. If we don't, let's say we're not raised by biological parents, then it can be caregivers as well. The idea here is that it is all possible for us to have that twin flame, third love, healthy love. But many times as humans, we let fear, we get scared of being alone, scared of being single, and our own unworthiness block us from moving forward. But if we are embracing the lessons, and no matter how long it sometimes takes, because especially those karmics tend to take a great deal of time, that third love is always possible.
Do you often hear of people saying, well, I feel like I'm dating the same person over and over and over again, or I'm attracting the wrong people, or there's no more nice people out there? I mean, do you hear that?
I do. My favorite one is when people say, I think my picker is broken, meaning like their little internal compass is broken. For those individuals, and whether it's friends or people I've worked with, when we're saying that we are dating or seem to only be attracting the same person over and over again, it comes with being really honest and transparent about our own process and what we are noticing. So let's say we seem to attract a whole litany of unavailable romantic partners, whether it's because they just don't want to show up, they don't want to express their feelings, perhaps maybe they're in other relationships, but we tend to attract this emotional unavailability. The question is, that's not going to just come from out of the blue, from thin air. It's always going to come from somewhere. One of the things that I always advocate for is really taking the time to get to the root of what you're noticing, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. So in this space of the unavailable, emotionally unavailable, it's looking at and saying, where was that in your childhood? Because the more that we can be able to try to identify the root of it, the more we will be able to help move through it. And even when we do, let's say we have that clarity, we say, oh, I realize, mom was working a great deal. I didn't really get the one-on-one time, the connection with her. That's why I'm doing this. It doesn't mean that will change it. After we have that awareness, after we can kind of do a little bit of our own soul excavating in our childhood wounds, the next process begins to say, okay, well, if love and relationships are a mirror for self, and I'm only attracting what I am, then we also have to ask ourselves, am I really emotionally available? Am I holding people at arm's length because I'm scared of getting hurt? And have I actually given myself the love that I'm seeking from other people? So kind of to that short answer, really, for those similar patterns that we find ourselves in, is being able to first identify the pattern, figure out where it came from, and then take that drastic step to start giving it to ourselves first.
So, why do we go through all this hurt of these karmic relationships? Is there a point to this?
I think we've all asked ourselves that before.
I'm sure.
We have. I think even when I start the chapter of the karmic relationships, which I already had a reader comment on, is I even invite people to take a deep breath, because that's what it feels like everyone needs when they talk about this karmic relationship. The karmic relationship is actually incredibly important. And that's why I say that no matter what occurred, no matter how horrible, and unfortunately, these karmic relationships can really be life altering and not very good and pleasant to be in. No matter how that experience is, the idea of the karmic relationship itself is not a bad one, because it's so necessary. The relationships, let's say soulmate, karmic, and twin flame, are not just about the different types of love you might move through, but they're really representative of the different levels of yourself, which also means that, let's say we stop at the soulmate relationship, we might not actually get to fully develop into the adult self in this lifetime that we could have potentially been able to, because of a lack of truth. The karmic relationship, because it really is all about our childhood wounds, that is an absolute game changer in our life moving forward, even in, let's say, terms of our career or our life path. Many might not take risks or advocate for themselves in the way that they want, because they're afraid of rejection, because they are still carrying a burden of unworthiness. But again, these feelings are not just ours. These feelings are what we have because of what we've experienced. So the entire purpose of the karmic relationship is to have you heal, those inner child wounds, be in a process of healing, as there's no level of perfection that any of us are ever going to reach, so that we can really feel free. It sets us free to be able to live our life, be ourselves, and welcome in that healthy love without letting any wounds hold us back any longer.
For those folks that say, okay, I'm still attracting the wrong kind of person, what advice would you give them to kind of change that?
First, I would ask, what is the wrong kind of person? I would ask, what qualities did those people have that they were attracting? And I would ask them at what point, let's say, they would become aware of those similarities in these partners, and even what defined wrong. Many times, although the reality is that we are always worthy, we are always deserving of a healthy, reciprocal, consistent, amazing love. The reality is that until we actually know that and have given it to ourselves, we are going to attract people who show us lessons on how to do that. So if we have been, let's say, quote unquote, dating the wrong person, and that is someone that we keep attracting, then it comes down to being able to realize, what do we need to start doing for ourselves? Even that kind of term that I'll use often is dating yourself with clients. If you keep dating the wrong partner, the wrong women, the wrong men, whomever it might be, then the idea is take a break and date yourself for a little while. You don't have to feel like you have to get to the bottom of your childhood wounds overnight, but date yourself, fall in love with yourself, and make a conscious choice to be single for a period of time and be okay with it.
Such wise advice. You've got so much great advice in this book. I was really impressed with it. What would you say to someone who is either starting this process and they're kind of evaluating the relationship they're currently in? I mean, how do we go about kind of identifying, are we in a karmic relationship? Is this, or we're just having a tough time with a soulmate or a twin flame?
So when I talk with people many times, I kind of begin and I say, why don't you tell me a little bit about your life? I don't even necessarily start with relationships. Um, let's say we're at the point where we're not quite sure about a particular relationship in our lives. We're not sure how we're feeling. We're not sure if it's the right one. We're not even sure what type it might be. And the idea is we have to start becoming a little bit more reflective, which also ties in that piece about emotional intelligence. And for many of us of a certain age, when we were growing up, we were not asked how we felt about something. We came home from school, we got a bad grade on a test, we had a fight with a friend. It was, well, do better next time, apologize. It was very reactive. So, a big part of being able to actually figure out and even start this process is being able to really identify your own feelings. Sometimes we actually need to begin with just literally processing and thinking about, how did you feel today? Especially if we've been in a connection, regardless of soulmate or karmic, that we've been in for a long time. We've obviously adopted certain coping skills. It's not uncommon for people to not even know how they feel. So kind of taking an exercise and reflecting each evening on, what are the feelings that they felt that day? What created those feelings? What were the trigger for them? And the more that we're able to identify the feelings, I've even suggested to different clients that they actually keep track of this. For those who are very confused and, let's say, having a very hard time whether accepting the soulmate relationship or that it's karmic, I've actually had people keep a record of their feelings. What was the predominant feeling from the day that you had with your partner? Because again, as humans, we have so many thoughts that kind of get mixed up in our heads. We get very busy. So the idea is, the more that we can reflect on how we feel in our connection, the more that we're going to be able to identify and figure out where it goes. But a big part of that is also knowing that we not only deserve to have that amazing love, but we really deserve to be connected intimately to ourselves and our life. And if we're in that situation where we don't know how we feel, I often say that we actually really do, but maybe we're just uncomfortable saying it.
I'd like to talk about the twin flame relationships right now and dive into that. I mean, for a lot of people, I mean, we've talked about soulmates. I think everyone has the karmic one down. And when we get to the twin flame, what is that, and how is that in a relationship?
So there's many definitions and a lot of information circling kind of out there in the world about twin flame. The original, let's say, esoteric definition is that twin flames were created by separating one soul into two bodies. And then forever, each soul is going to be looking for its quote unquote other half, its counterpart. Many of the articles or pieces of information that you read about twin flames actually describes the karmic relationship. They talk about a runner and chaser phase. They talk about a toxic off and on schedule. They talk about one person sometimes being married or in another relationship. So there was this original idea, and again, this is evolution of information, society, love, relationships. Their original definition of this idea of twin flames was really more descriptive of that karmic, like you said, we know so much about already, and not really representative of a truly healthy, genuine relationship. So the twin flame connection is the highest form of love that you can encounter in this lifetime. The twin flame relationship is encompassed by an unconditional love, but that does not mean, as many times in other relationships, it does not mean that it is a sacrificing of yourself or the unconditional acceptance. The twin flame relationship is a relationship in which two people who have begun their work, they've begun their path, they have moved through being able to identify their truth and kind of what they think, what they feel their authentic path might be. They have moved through those aspects of the karmic lessons and healing those childhood wounds. And so the twin flames aren't people who are perfect or who are rare in this lifetime. It's really just two imperfect humans who have done a lot of their work and no longer are going to respond to triggers in the same way or self-sabotage or push away the very thing that they want. So by doing a lot of that self-healing and work, we're then able to be in the position to have that healthy relationship. I always say that we're always going to be triggered as humans, no matter how much healing or self-work. There's never a place of perfection to get to. But in the twin flame, many times the triggering that we will feel will be around being able to receive a healthy love, being able to recognize, let's say, if past triggers come up from other relationships, and being able to then react differently. So the twin flame relationship is really the healthiest relationship that we can be in, where it is not representative of our societal conditioning or our childhood wounds.
So I would think some people are going, okay, well, I've had a lot of the karmic relationships in my past. I've gotten to a point where I've been doing the work on myself. So how do I call in my own twin flame? Is there a process to do that?
You can get into the place where you can send out that vibration and that call for your twin flame. One of the most kind of important aspects with being able to call in the twin flame is if you've moved through all the other relationships, you are feeling very confident in what you want out of love, out of life. If you're feeling very confident in your sense of self, then that also means not necessarily sacrificing that for what seems easy. If we're genuinely ready and wanting to call in our twin flame, a big part of that is being able to be confident in our secure space without, let's say, saying yes to that date with that person simply because they asked, because then we're sending mixed signals to the universe. We're saying we're ready for this great, healthy love, but we're just saying yes to this person because they asked. So we have to really be aware of the choices that we're making and the space that we're holding. But we can also look at doing moon rituals. Moon rituals are mentioned in Written in the Stars, and they have them for each relationship. The twin flame one is really about being able to set an intention for the healthy love that you desire by using a mirror of your own that you've developed for your own self.
Well, and you have the moon ritual in your book, right?
I do. Yes. The release ceremony for the karmic ones are in there too. that seems that what we all might need the most. But there are the moon rituals written in the stars for people to be able to use. And there's a combination of crystals. We can use herbs a lot of times, whether it's cinnamon for passion or rose for love, and being able to really set that intention to be able to call that person into our life, while also being very consistent in the vibration that we're sending out, which means protecting the space that we hope another will come in to fill.
Do you ever come across people who never meet their twin flame?
Many times when I first connect with people, it's when they're on their journey. So people that I connect with and work with, everybody is capable of having that twin flame, that third and healthy love. It's just a matter of progressing through it. Many times people will often find me in the karmic, sometimes in the soulmate, but often in the karmic connection phase because it's so tumultuous. And through that healing process, that third love is out there, even when they have their own doubts about whether that's possible. So it is something that we are moving to as a society. And if that's what we want and we meet those lessons head on, then that is something that I see. And I think and I hope that it's going to become more common in our lifetime.
Do you work with people that are looking to bring their twin flame into their lives and they just need a little help?
So there are some people that I work with where it's a matter of, I've done everything I want to bring this person, or I want to attract this person into my life. What can I do? When we have those situations, one, we kind of go through and just make sure that there's nothing else kind of preventing this person or this meeting from taking place. What I always say about healing as well, as much as that karmic relationship really dives deep into the childhood wounds, what really kind of ends up coming about is many times we might not realize that there is another piece of healing to do. So first we kind of go through everything. We look at, are we, really in a place where we're open, we're ready to receive? Are we opening ourselves to new experiences? Are we making sure that we're not being, let's say, too descriptive over appearance or finances with, let's say, the partner that we hope to attract? Are we having that open mind, generally speaking? When we're doing that, then it also comes again about holding that space. Are we being consistent with ourselves? Making sure that we are emotionally available, and then using, their own personal, which works best, using their own personal moon sign for the rituals that would be able to work better for them. But with all of this, there is, again, with a lot of that kind of toxic description of the twin flame out there, you can go online at any point right now and you will be able to pay someone money to be able to call in your twin flame. And the reality is that's just not accurate. Your twin flame will come to you based on your vibration and what you are sending out. So that's why, again, this is really that journey to self, because in order to become what we're seeking, we first need to become it ourselves.
I love how in your book you talk about how our soulmate and karmic relationships really trigger us in ways that allow us to heal wounds that maybe we didn't know that we had. And how empowering is that to look at those experiences in that light?
And that's even what I was just describing or getting into a bit, is that, let's say we have an obvious wound of abandonment or something like this. So we heal that. But then the reality is that for most of us, we're not doing this work until maybe 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And so we've also developed coping mechanisms and coping strategies. And we might actually realize that, let's say, a coping strategy of having really tough boundaries is actually keeping out love now rather than keeping out, let's say, what's hurting us. And so it's really about continually being open to the process. And again, it really is, once we begin this journey to the self, once we begin this journey of diving deep into our own meaning, into that soul blueprint, the reality is that this is a journey that never ends. As humans, as long as we are alive on this planet in this lifetime, there is more to learn, there's more to discover. And that means that there's also likely more to heal.
Do you believe that there's a destiny that's involved in our relationships?
I absolutely do. And that's what I think is so profound with the astrological birth charts, because when it comes to destiny, many times, even these twin flame relationships, it might not end up being someone new to your life. Sometimes twin flames are people that we knew a long time ago, or that we have briefly crossed paths with, but perhaps obviously weren't at the vibration, weren't ready for that type of connection. And so what is so amazing and so incredible is that, especially with any of these, but the twin flame is the one that we all want and hope to achieve, is that it's almost as if these two people, regardless of if they're in the same town or location, they can sense one another and their vibration. And so it will be someone calling up someone randomly on a Tuesday saying, I thought about you, or they'll go to the same coffee shop that somebody else will go to. And then everything will kind of become a catalyst from that point on. But it's not just that romantic destiny as the twin flame that we have within ourselves, our lives, and our charts, but it's also the soulmate and karmic, because as painful as that karmic is, there's also no one more perfect to help you learn those lessons about yourself.
I think that's so empowering to be able to know that these relationships are there, and they're not there to hurt us, but really to help us heal and move through the different lessons we need to learn.
And it's something that I feel, especially as we do get older and we go through numerous relationships, it can be incredibly difficult and hard to start over, to go through heartbreak, or to go through a very toxic, unhealthy relationship. And we have this idea that, let's say, this twin flame is, that's the good one, that's the best one. And it's a healthy love. It's one that's not going to hurt you. But it doesn't mean that the others are bad, because it is that belief and the awareness that we can't hate the very relationships that we called into our life to become better.
And there's the burn.
I know. I can be accused of being a little honest sometimes.
I'm going to be thinking about that statement for a while.
We all do.
So with that in mind, what do you hope readers and our listeners take away from your book?
My greatest hope for people is honestly to be able to know what it is they're worth, to be able to stand up, look at these relationships, realize that they don't have to accept just the mundane. They don't have to accept sleepwalking through their life. They don't have to accept toxic behavior or partners who continually, let's say, cheat on them, that they actually deserve to be loved in all the ways that they've ever needed to be. And so my hope and goal with this book is that by readers being able to understand themselves more deeply, that they can then actually, one, love themselves, of course, but also finally have the healthy, stable relationship they've always craved.
Well, Kate, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
I am on my website at wordsofkaterose.com, also on Instagram at Words of Kate Rose as well. And on Facebook, it is Words of Kate Rose Club. I also have my podcast, Soul Gold, which people can also listen to me usually weekly on as well. And I have upcoming retreats and all sorts of wonderful events that readers can connect with me during.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It was absolutely wonderful meeting with you, Marianne, and truly a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Kate. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Written in the Stars. Written in the Stars is available to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.